All right, so get ready because we're diving into one of those cases that just gets under your skin. You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah.
The Sherri Papini disappearance.
Hmm.
I think, everyone listening wants the real story, right? The truth behind the headlines.
Right.
And trust me, this one is twisty.
Oh, yeah.
So, our main source for this deep dive is an audio file
Okay.
called Case 245 sherrypapini.mp3.
Okay.
And let's just say it's going to take us on a wild ride.
I bet. It's, this case really struck a nerve with people, I think, because it played on our, deepest fears about safety and security, right?
Yeah.
The idea of a young mother vanishing without a trace is scary enough.
Right.
But then this case added another layer. That fear of human trafficking.
Right.
Especially, along major highways like Interstate 5.
Yeah, you're right. That fear was definitely amplified in this case.
Mm-hmm.
So to understand why we need to paint a picture of Sherri Papini,
Okay.
the source describes her as this 34-year-old supermom living in Redding, California, dedicated wife, active lifestyle, the type.
Yeah.
She was even training for a 5K jogging with Michael Bublé's Everything on repeat, which was her wedding song.
Wow.
It was November 2nd, 2016, a seemingly ordinary day
Okay.
when she went out for a run and vanished.
The source really emphasizes how unsettling the discovery of her belongings was.
Yeah.
Her husband, Keith, found her iPhone near their mailbox.
Okay.
Screen-cracked earbuds still in,
Oh, wow.
with everything still playing.
Really?
There were even strands of her hair tangled around the earbuds. It was like something straight out of a crime drama.
Okay, that sends chills down my spine.
Yeah.
It's almost like someone wanted to make sure her phone was found.
Right.
What were the initial theories about what happened to her?
Well, with so little to go on,
Yeah.
there were a lot of theories floating around. Some people thought she might have run away,
Okay.
maybe to escape a difficult situation at home. Others feared she'd been abducted,
Right.
possibly by someone from the nearby drug den, or even worse, by human traffickers.
Wow.
There was even speculation that her disappearance might be connected to a cold case, the unsolved disappearance of Tara Smith,
Oh, wow.
a teenager who vanished from the same area years earlier.
Really?
Apparently, Sherri and Tara even looked similar and attended the same high school.
So, right from the start, this case tapped into a lot of anxieties, especially within the Latino community who already felt vulnerable.
Right.
The source really highlights how the lack of information fueled fear and suspicion,
Yeah,
with people connecting dots that might not have even existed.
of course.
And of course, the media frenzy didn't help.
Exactly. The media coverage was intense. The nation was glued to the story, desperate for answers.
Yeah.
And then, just as abruptly as she disappeared,
Yeah.
Sherri reappeared on Thanksgiving morning, 22 days later,
Wow.
found on the side of a highway over 100 miles from home.
Really?
But her return was far from a happy ending.
Here's where things get really intense.
Yeah.
The source describes her condition as absolutely shocking.
Oh.
She was emaciated, covered in bruises, burns, and ligature marks. Those are marks left by something being tied tightly around her wrists and ankles. Her hair had been chopped off, her nose was broken, and she'd even been branded on her shoulder. It was a horrifying sight.
Yeah, the branding was particularly disturbing. It seemed like a deliberate act of cruelty,
Yeah.
raising questions about the perpetrator's motives and the message they were trying to send.
It's like they wanted to dehumanize her, to mark her as their property. So what did Sherri say happened to her? Who did this to her?
Well, Sherri eventually told a chilling tale of being held captive by two Hispanic women.
Okay.
She described being tortured, threatened, and even said they were planning to sell her to someone who claimed to be a police officer.
Oh my gosh.
Her story added fuel to the already raging fire of fear and speculation.
Her story seems to confirm everyone's worst fears,
Yeah.
but I'm guessing things weren't as straightforward as they seemed.
You're right.
Yeah.
Even amidst the relief that Sherri was alive,
Yeah.
doubts started to creep in.
Okay.
The source mentioned some inconsistencies in her account that investigators began to notice. For example, Sherri mentioned cutting her foot while struggling with one of her captors,
Okay.
but medical examiners found no evidence of such an injury.
Huh.
There were also discrepancies in her accounts of when and how she was branded.
Oh, really?
These little details didn't quite add up.
So those inconsistencies started to plant seeds of doubt. It's like you think you're putting together a puzzle, but some pieces are from a completely different box.
Exactly. And as investigators dug deeper into Sherri's past,
Yeah.
they found even more pieces that didn't fit the puzzle.
Oh, really?
The source mentions a blog post from 2007 allegedly written by Sherri under her maiden name,
Wow.
containing racist and white supremacist language. It
Mm.
was like a bombshell dropped right in the middle of the investigation.
Wow, that's a huge twist. What was the reaction to that blog post? Did Sherry address it?
She vehemently denied writing it. Her ex-husband even came forward to defend her, saying she wasn't racist and that the blog was likely written by someone trying to smear her reputation.
Right.
But the damage was done. It really made people question her character and her motives. On top of that, investigators found an old Pinterest account with similar themes,
Oh, wow.
further fueling suspicions.
It's amazing how the internet can come back to haunt you, right? I mean, anything you've ever said or done online can be unearthed.
Yeah.
It really makes you think twice about your digital footprint. But while the public was grappling with these revelations,
Yeah.
investigators were busy uncovering more cracks in Sherry's story, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Remember that male DNA found on her clothing that I mentioned earlier? Well, investigators ran it through every database they could,
Right?
but there were no matches. Nothing.
Wow.
This, along with the other inconsistencies, raised a huge red flag.
It's like in those mystery novels where you think you figured out who did it,
Right.
and then boom, a new clue pops up that changes everything.
That's a great analogy. And in this case, that game-changing clue was the DNA. You can't argue with science. Investigators also started digging into Sherri's past,
Right.
speaking with friends and ex-boyfriends,
But
and a troubling pattern started to emerge.
what kind of pattern are we talking about?
People described her as a chronic liar, someone who often fabricated stories and manipulated situations to gain attention or sympathy. It's important to remember, though, that we're relying on the perspectives presented in the source material.
Right, of course. So are you saying there's a chance these accounts might be biased?
It's always possible. We have to consider the source and their potential motivations. But the source also mentions that even Sherri's own family had reported her to the police in the past for various incidents,
Oh, wow.
including claims of self-harm and theft. It paints a complicated picture, to say the least.
This is getting more and more intriguing. So with all these red flags popping up, what did investigators do next?
For a while, the case went cold,
Right.
but investigators never completely gave up. And then a few years later, a new development emerged, thanks to advancements in DNA technology. They decided to try a relatively new tool: genealogical databases.
You mean those websites where people submit their DNA to trace their family history and connect with relatives?
Exactly. In 2020, they got a hit.
Oh, wow.
The DNA from Sherri's clothing partially matched someone in one of those databases.
Okay.
And through some impressive detective work, they were able to track down a potential suspect, James Reyes.
Okay.
He lived hundreds of miles away from Redding and seemingly had a clean record.
Okay, so who is James Reyes? How does he fit into all of this?
Well, that's where the story takes a truly unexpected turn.
Okay.
It turns out that Sherri and James had a romantic relationship that ended years ago.
Wait, what? So her ex-boyfriend is somehow involved?
Yeah,
But that doesn't explain the kidnapping and branding.
you're right. And this is where things get even more bizarre.
Okay.
Investigators confronted James, and after initially denying any involvement, he confessed. He said that Sherri had contacted him out of the blue,
Oh, wow.
claiming her husband was abusive and that she needed to escape.
So she reached out to him for help. But what about the kidnapping story? The two Hispanic women.
According to James, that was all a fabrication orchestrated by Sherri. He claims she asked him to rent a car, pick her up in Redding,
Oh my gosh.
and hide her at his apartment in Costa Mesa.
Hold on, so you're saying she went with him willingly? She wasn't actually kidnapped?
That's what James claimed.
Wow.
He said Sherri even inflicted the injuries on herself,
What?
and that he even helped her with some of them at her request,
Really?
like breaking her nose with a hockey stick and branding her. And apparently there's a mountain of evidence to support his claims.
This is unbelievable, but why would she go to such extreme lengths to fake her own kidnapping? What was she trying to achieve?
That's the million-dollar question, and unfortunately this source doesn't offer a clear answer. It hints that maybe she was desperate to escape her life,
Okay.
or perhaps she craved attention and sympathy.
Right.
Maybe it was a combination of factors, including mental health issues, that led her down this path.
This is just mind-blowing. So what happened when investigators confronted Sherri with all of this? How did she react? So the detectives lay it all out for her. The DNA matched James's confession. The mountain of evidence.
Really?
What was her reaction? Did she finally come clean?
At first, she denied everything. Claimed she hadn't seen James in years and stuck to her story about the two Hispanic women.
Wow.
But the detectives were relentless,
Yeah.
presenting her with phone records, text messages, even audio recordings of her conversations with James during her supposed captivity. It was like watching a house of cards slowly collapse.
It must have been incredibly tense. You can
Yeah.
almost feel the walls closing in on her. At what point did she finally break?
It was a pretty emotional moment, actually. The source describes her breaking down, admitting that she had been talking to other men, but insisting
Yeah.
that she loved her husband and never intended to leave him.
Okay.
However, even as she confessed,
Yeah?
there was still this strange clinging to the fabricated narrative.
Right.
She kept talking about a younger captor who was kind to her and helped her escape. It seemed like she was trying to project this more sympathetic role onto James,
Okay.
even though he was the one who exposed the truth.
That's fascinating. It's almost like she was trying to protect him, even though he was the one who blew the whistle on the whole scheme. It's a really bizarre twist.
Yeah.
So, what happened next? What were the consequences of her actions?
Well, the fallout was pretty significant.
Yeah.
She was arrested and charged with mail fraud and making false statements to federal agents.
Wow.
And remember all those donations that poured in through GoFundMe and victim compensation funds?
Yeah.
She was ordered to pay it all back, over $300,000 in restitution.
Oh my gosh.
It was a harsh reminder that actions have consequences, especially when those actions involve deceiving an entire community and exploiting public sympathy. She eventually pleaded guilty and was sentenced to 18 months in prison.
Wow. So she lost her reputation, faced serious financial repercussions, and even served time. What about her family? How did they deal with this devastating revelation?
The source paints a picture of complete heartbreak and betrayal.
Yeah.
Keith, who had stood by her through everything, was understandably devastated and filed for divorce.
Right.
He sought full custody of their children, which makes sense considering the trauma they must have gone through.
Of course.
Even Sherri's own sister expressed a mix of anger and sadness,
Yeah.
pointing out the harm Sherri caused, not just to their family, but also to real victims of kidnapping and trafficking, whose stories might now be met with skepticism.
It's a tragic ending all around. It really makes you think about the ripple effects of deception and the lasting damage it can inflict. This case is a whirlwind of emotions and unanswered questions. We've explored the fear, the media frenzy, the shocking twists and turns. But in the end, we're left with the biggest question of all: why?
Right.
What drove Sherri Papini to orchestrate such an elaborate hoax?
That's the mystery that continues to intrigue and perplex. Was it a desperate cry for help? A twisted attempt to escape a life she felt trapped in? A need for attention and validation that spiraled out of control? Maybe a combination of all these things? We may never truly know the answer. But what we can take away from this deep dive is a heightened awareness. An awareness of the complexities of human behavior, the power of deception, and the importance of critical thinking. As you continue to explore true crime and the stories that captivate us, remember to question everything.
Right.
Consider multiple perspectives,
Yeah.
and never underestimate the power of the human mind to both deceive and be deceived.
Wise words. This case serves as a stark reminder that truth can be elusive, and that sometimes the people we think we know are capable of things we could never imagine. It's a sobering thought, but an important one. So to our listener, as you continue to ponder the Sherri Papini case, remember to keep asking questions, stay curious, and always be willing to challenge your own assumptions.